Whitney Ringwald. How's it going?
Good.
How much do you know about the etymology of your name?
I know that Ringwald means ring of trees and or like a ring of forest in German.
Wald.
Confirmed?
Wald. Well, I mean, I'm not the German expert, but Wald does mean forest, and Ring, it stands to reason. And then Whitney is in English, of course. And apparently it's this specific place in England, which is like an island, a round island that's white. So the point is, there's a way to interpret your name as like Queen of the Circle.
Oh yeah. I like that much better than White Island, which has always struck me as kind of a weird one. Like,
Oh yeah, you like white people only island. That's kind of
yeah,
uncomfortable.
exactly. I was like, I mean, it's kind of true, but like, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, does that suit your identity though better? Maybe Queen of the Circle.
I mean, would that be weird if I said yes?
It's your identity. You're allowed to. I mean, you don't necessarily have to share it with people, but you're allowed to have whatever identity you want, I think.
I'd say like queen, there's no queen part of my identity.
Maybe king, ruler. Well, ruler, I guess, doesn't have to be gendered, or is it the gendered part, or is it the being in charge part that
It's
you
the
think is
ruler
different?
part.
I
I mean,
see.
I and because and if I were to choose a ruler, it would be a Tsarina because I just think that that's a pretty um cool title.
Okay. Well, we can call you that. Or just like inhabitant of a lovely island, like maybe full of white flowers, full of people of diverse background, all of whom
Love it.
like the interpersonal circle, maybe. Hmm.
Exactly. And it's all horizontal, and I'm just one of
I see.
many.
Okay. Egalitarian. Okay. Well, then funny to find yourself in Minnesota, which is like, so I'm one of these nerds who like is really into history. When I was a graduate student, I had a t-shirt with like all of my favorite dead psychologists on it. And I collect books. So for
Like,
me, like Minnesota is a big deal. You got your Hathaways, your Meals, your Telegans, etc., and all the way down the line. Like in personality psychology, these ghosts are still roaming the halls,
yeah,
and not so egalitarian always in my so I
that is
feel.
that
So
is true.
yeah, do you feel that being at Minnesota? Do you feel like holy shit, I'm at the place where like MMPI was made and behavior genetics kind of became a thing and
Yeah, no, I do. And as the Stark Hathaway chair, I feel like endowed chair, I feel like I'm supposed to carry some sort of torch like that. And I do think that though it's been maybe watered down a bit by these issues that you're implying right now, which would be that it also came with a very like old school mentality or like men's club kind of a thing. And I think that Minnesota has been doing a lot to kind of counteract that, the cultural aspect of it, which doesn't have to go with the legacy part of it, but it does seem like by trying to counteract the cultural aspect, maybe it's watered down some of the legacy part. I don't know.
I mean,
It's just
there
my
have been women who found success at Minnesota before you got there too, certainly. But I mean, to me, it's just I think my impression is that it's not a place that has traditionally suffered fools gladly, and
that's what.
it's not a place that's traditionally suffered fools gladly. Like, if you say something dumb, people aren't going to be nice to you about it.
Oh
That's
yeah.
kind of the
Yeah,
impression I've always gotten.
yeah, right. No, it was yeah, I feel weird like saying this about my employer, but it's okay.
Oh, fair
Um
enough. Yeah, you don't have to. I sort of put you in a corner here.
oh no, I mean maybe I'm candid to a fault. That it was surprising to me when I first got the job that when I told people, like especially in like personality circles, and they're like, "Oh my God, are you okay? Like, are you worried about it?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And I learned about this reputation, and I think that if I didn't have that, if people didn't tell me about that and didn't tell me about like previous instances and things, I would never have gather that impression. Like I think that its reputation is sort of set in amber, and from my view, it's changed a lot. Like that's
Yeah.
not how it is now.
Sure. Well, I mean, I would have been stoked to have a job at Mann. I mean, I'm more aware of all the amazing stuff that's happened there for the last century in personality and psychopathology than I am of, but I'm male, maybe that's part of it. But
Well, I mean, I think it's literally the most perfect institution for me in terms of it's one of the few clinical psychology programs that it's not a naughty word to talk about personality.
sure.
Like every other place I applied for a clinical psychology job, I like pretended like I didn't study personality, even though I basically identified equally, if not more, as being a personality psychologist.
Yeah, well, we can talk trash about those places. Then, do you want to list them in order and go through them one at a time? So, have you memorized every MMPI item? And I mean like the original items, not these new MMPI 3 items that are all watered down. I mean like the Black Tarry stool items and the mechanics magazines,
Like
the classic.
popular.
Yeah, the classic. I mean, all 567 of them, have you memorized them or
So my confession is that I don't really know how to use the MMPI. And I teach the diagnostic assessment course like that's
shame?
for the grad students, and I have Paul Beasy come in
Oh
and
yeah.
do this.
Well, you
I was
could
like,
do a lot worse. Yeah, you could do a lot worse than Paul. I'll tell you, man, if you hang out, I mean, I've had the pleasure of hanging out with some like old school original MMPI 1 wizards, people who were like pissed when the MMPI 2 came out. And a lot of them are no longer, active, as you can imagine. But these guys were amazing because they really did memorize every item. And I mean, the problem with the MMPI, particularly the MMPI, well, one of many problems is all the cross-loading. So the same item is on like 7 different scales. But if you're a wizard and you know exactly which item is on which scales, then I mean, people will be like, well, these things are up, but you could just ignore that because the three of the scales items come from here and three of them over there. What you're really going to see is like this pattern. And
right.
people would say the damnedest things like, you would think that it's like this Barnum kind of bullshit, except for then you hear the person, like the therapist in the room, like at a workshop, somebody say, this is the kind of person that does this, that, and the other. And then you see the therapist with their jaw on the floor being like, so the interesting thing, it's kind of like the Rorschach to me, or the PAI, which I was trained on. And one of the reasons that I'm supposed to dislike Minnesota is because, I'm supposed to be a PAI kind of guy. But that if you know the instrument inside and out, then you can be like a wizard. But it's so dang hard to learn and takes so much time and so many assessments to get there that it doesn't really make
Totally.
sense for many people. I mean, I'm talking about the old school. The MMPI 3 and the PAI are a little bit easier to interpret than the old one was, but
Totally. It is like maybe overly complicated. Like I don't know, like I understand what you're saying of like, oh, it's really insightful and da da da, but is it that much gain from what you get from just like fill out this PID 5 and
yeah,
be-
I think it is.
I mean like I'm actually doing assessments now on the side, and we do the MMPI, and I basically just scroll to the sci-fi.
Yeah.
Look at the
Well, I mean, that's the
output.
thing is like if you don't have the history and the normative base in your head and having seen like when I first got to my PhD program, my advisor Les Moore had written the PAI, and so I spent my first year just trying to get to know this instrument. And the first summer, I went into his office and I was like, okay, I've read the books, I've done a few assessments, but I really want to become like Meister level. And he's like, well, there's this box of cases on the floor, and Parr keeps bugging me about writing a case book. Why don't we write a case book? So we wrote a case book my first summer, and I got to the point where you can look at the instrument, scan the thing, and you can know a person. Like it's an empathy magnifier. And I think the factor analytically derived measures can't do that the same way as construct-based measures can. So with all due respect and love to the PID 5, I really think there is a difference.
Well, I guess let me ask you, if do you think that that is better than just like sitting with the person and like do you get more information from that than you do having an hour session with them?
I think you get the information much faster because you don't need to, I mean, they have to take the hour filling out the instrument, but you can do something else while they're doing that. And it's a different method. So I think you get non-overlapping information from a questionnaire relative to what you get from talking to a person. So
Well,
Um,
of course, it means two different forms of self-report. Um,
yeah, but they're
but I
different.
think,
Like people will tell you different things in interview than they will on a questionnaire.
oh, certainly, and understanding what it is that they decide to disclose to you in person versus like that meta information is also really important too. It's like, oh, that's what you want when you saw me face to face. That's what you wanted me to know versus when you were by yourself. I think I'm kind of pushing on this because I am nominally the director of field trials for the high top measure, and I'm trying to get clinics to take up like high top E measures instead of the DSM. And it's been an amazingly hard sell despite a lot of kind of like people talking about like, oh, we need clinical utility, we need to put high top into clinics and da da da. And there's been people aren't taking it up and they're excited about it. And my hypothesis is that a big part of it is that even though people are like, yeah, that's nice, it's an empirically based measure, like the MMPI, for example, but I'm already doing that in my head when I meet a client. Like I don't need a measure for it. And yeah, so it's good to hear that there is some people who think that there's value in it, but it's a matter of convincing other people.
I mean, isn't this the person we should be most suspicious of? Like, I don't need data. I can do it in my head. I mean, this to me strikes me as very suspicious right off of the tongue. The other thing I think that an instrument like the PAI or MMPI has that the high top doesn't have yet, at least, are strong norms, both clinical and non-clinical norms, and validity scales. And I know that there's a whole thing about validity scales, and people in personally don't like them. But without them, in my experience, you can't interpret a profile because you don't know how the person was approaching the test and how they were thinking. And that's also something that's difficult to do in an interview, although you can get a kind of intuition about it. But the real difference, I think, I mean, part of it is what you said is that like what a person will tell you face to face is different than what a person will tell you a questionnaire. But I think the big difference is that you have norms, like quantitative norms with huge census matched samples, normative samples and clinical samples. So you can really see, well, like, okay, where do you fall exactly? And it's one
Totally.
scale higher than another, like statistically. And I think it's difficult. I mean, Neil, speaking of Minnesota, wrote a whole book about actuarial versus clinical prediction. And I think
Totally.
he wasn't wrong.
No, I agree.
Um, okay, well, you're all settled in now. So you're now what was the word that you used? Not queen. You don't like queen. What was it? Something with a Z?
Tsarina.
What is that?
Oh,
Oh,
it's like a
Tsarina. Oh, like
czar.
Russian. Oh, yeah, 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 right. You're the
That's a
Tsarina.
C.
It depends
Yeah.
on, yeah, I suppose it, or a T. Sometimes
Oh,
people write it with a T. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, right,
Of okay. And you're in charge of assessment and you hate the MMPI at Minnesota. Stark Hathaway is
right.
hiccuping and sneezing as we speak. Yeah, the worms are shooting out of his nose. Um,
Yeah, people graves and whatnot. Yeah.
um, and you went there from Aiden. I want to talk a little bit about Aiden behind his back, if that's all right. Since
Yeah.
now you've already disclosed that you're comfortable talking out of school.
Mhm.
What was it like to have Aiden as a PhD supervisor?
I was trying to come up with a scandalous lie for this interview, but honestly, and this, to like make this be a really good tell-all, and so you could be like viral, and because this is a big
Byron,
deal.
yeah. That's what I'm going for,
But
by the way. That's what I'm.
yeah, I figured
Yeah,
it's very likely, especially for this specific
yeah,
topic.
totally. Yeah.
But I honestly, it was just really awesome through and through, and I can't even like make something up about it that is scandalous. I think that from an interpersonal perspective, I've come to appreciate how Aiden is very like a good balance of like autonomy granting and supportive. So like creating psychological safety to explore and like make mistakes, but so having that sort of agency, but not so much that feeling like I would be led down the wrong path, or like he would kindly be like, and let's maybe not do that idea. Anyways, just like to me, a template of like really effective mentorship. And like he's pretty cool. Like he's like a likable guy.
He's a likable guy. Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. I think most people would agree with that. It's true. It's hard to make jokes about Aiden to his face or otherwise because he's got such a robust sense of self. When he came here, he gave a talk, and I tried to do this whole this whole, you know how you introduce people, and it's always so awkward because you're like, oh, Whitney Ringwald has won this award, and she's published this many papers in this journal, and she edits this thing, and she does this, and she's blah 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 blah. And the person who's being talked about, if they're not like mortified, then they're the kind of person you wouldn't want to be introducing in a way. And then a lot of times people just go on, and the audience doesn't care because they're like they've never heard of the awards or the journals we're talking about. So
Yeah.
it's this whole weird thing that we always do when we're introducing people. And I live in a place that's relatively formal. So I decided like fuck it, I'm gonna do this weird thing. And I did like a bizarro introduction when Aiden came here to give a talk about like how he was in the circus and he was in prison and then the nuns had to get him like crack the whip and get him into shape when he went to Villanova and stuff. And no one in the audience got it. They didn't, I don't think this just proves the point. Like they don't even people don't even listen to what you're saying because no one not only did they not laugh, they just didn't even notice that I was saying bizarre things. And Aiden just like didn't skip a beat. He just thanks Chris and starts his talk. So
He's pretty unflappable.
I'm the only one who got anything out of the whole. I mean, I still enjoyed it, but I'm the only one who got anything out of it.
Well, you're reliving it now, so I'm glad you can, have a second audience for that. And if you want to try it again when I come
Right.
visit,
Yeah, you're coming. Maybe I'll talk about how you're the Tsarina of an island that
well, why
only lets
not?
white people on it or something. And see if that gets a reaction
Yeah.
or you've spent your assistant professorship memorizing MMPI items.
Yep.
How much, I mean, you're starting to mentor, you have been mentoring. How much do you think you imprinted on Aiden? Like how much do you think I mean, it's always this combination of like you're you and you have to be yourself, but also you learned a certain way. And unlike or like many things, editing, reviewing, there's typically not formal training. You kind of just like have the experience you had. And like being a child, you sort of assume like probably this is the way everyone does it. And only later do you realize like, no, there's vastly different ways of, well, it's not true that as a graduate student you're not aware of this, but how much do you think that your mentoring style is comes from Aiden, and what did you take?
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting because I'm definitely still like developing that style. Sure, I always will be, of course, but I can like feel myself trying on like certain things, like, and I'll notice like when it's like, oh, that didn't feel like me, or like that didn't feel quite right. Like I can tell that that was more just me copying something. And sometimes
Uh-huh.
I'll try something on, like, oh yeah, like that's much more me. And I think having the confidence to then deviate from the template that I have in my head, which I can only have based on mostly Aiden, but also like, some other collaborators and things like that. But having the confidence to deviate from that because it feels like me, and it also feels like it's effective in the moment. And I'm still sort of figuring that part out.
Yeah, I've changed a
But
lot,
I
I
think,
think, over time. Go ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna say like that. I think that, and I think a big part of it is because I talked to a lot of people who similarly were probably going through similar processes, but oftentimes it's like, well, I had this like really shitty mentor, and I'm trying to like not do what they did, and that's a different process than what I'm doing, which is like I have this awesome mentor, and so like in some ways it's like I want to be exactly like Aiden because I want to be as good as he was, but it's not gonna, you can't just like take it off the rack, and like I can't be the same exact person
Mhm.
as he was. So that's it's just a that's kind of the tension that I'm working with.
Yeah, you can sort of steal specific tricks, but you got to be yourself. I mean, a lot of times authors give this advice of like the first couple things you write, like, fiction authors and stuff, the first couple things you write, you should try to copy your favorite authors and, write like Kafka or whatever. And then
Yeah.
if you do that enough times, that eventually you kind of find your own voice. And
Yep.
maybe
Yeah,
mentoring is like that
exactly.
too. Yeah. I think my impression is that, well, maybe I'm wrong about this, but my impression is that most people who study interpersonal stuff, I think there's a kind of tradition of being a caring, supportive mentor. It's sort of a vet. There's probably a lot goes back to Aaron, your grandpa. who's like
Yeah.
he's like the czar of mentorship. I think all of his mentees just grovel. Um,
Well, yeah. Well, it's interesting, and I think this is an okay thing to say. That I haven't been in that dynamic with Aaron much. Like I've collaborated with him on some things. But he was a reviewer on a paper. He signed his reviews on a paper that I submitted recently. And actually his reviews were extraordinarily helpful and constructive and pointed, but like also kind of like direct, I guess, or like, I don't know, like harsh is too strong of a word, but somewhere on the continuum of like straight to the point. So I don't know, how does that align with your experience?
I mean, this is what I like. I value
Okay.
this from people. I sort of don't like.
Oh,
I'm not subtle enough to understand it when people are like not saying what they mean. So I prefer this kind of approach, and I generally don't feel like it's harsh when people give me direct feedback. I think the other direction, I think I could be much better at like this, sandwiching your feedback with nice things. I usually just say like, here's the 17 things I didn't like, fix it and send it back.
yeah,
And then I'm like, oh, I
yeah,
should probably like say something nice too. It's good or whatever.
yeah.
To me, it sort of goes without saying that if I'm spending my time reading something that you've written, I already value you and the work. And so the compliment's already implicit, but I know that people don't respond that way. But I think Aaron talks about something that his advisor, Jerry Wiggins, says, which is you should cut people with a velvet knife. Have you heard this
Hmm.
expression before? So I think that is the idea that you want your feedback, reviews to students, whatever, to be direct. We found like with the stuff we've been doing with realness, we found that that when people are real, they're kind of anxious about it. They're like, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I don't want to like. But if you ask people like, what do you really value in a friend or someone you want to be close to? This is like right at the top of the list. Like, tell me the truth. So my sense is that his students kind of feel that. And maybe if you're an author on a paper and he's a reviewer and you don't have that relationship, or he's your grandpa, and then it's like, okay, is he like mad or something? But um, yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think I mean, I think that being direct is absolutely essential for trust in a relationship because when there's ambiguity in communication, then you just fill in that ambiguity with like whatever it is that's in your head. But I think that directness, and again, I'm not talking about Aaron necessarily, but just in general, that the directness works when it's against the backdrop of like, well, I also know this person has my best intentions in mind. And if you
Yeah,
don't know that,
right.
then the directness doesn't necessarily mean the same thing.
Yeah.
But so in a mentor relationship, I think that works. But if you're just some random colleague that you don't have a long-standing relationship with or something like that, it's maybe less obvious.
Yeah, I think Aaron does have an edge to him too. I mean, I think I have seen him in situations where he doesn't necessarily care a lot about the other person's interests, where he can be, uh, he can be direct. The first time I ever met him was at Sitar, and I gave this talk about pathoplasticity and eating disorders. Now, I'm going to use a bunch of words that either you know or you don't. And I said, well, the groups are different in R square, so this is evidence for pathoplasticity, which is a stupid thing to say. Because I was a second year graduate student. I didn't know what I was doing. And at the end, he said, good talk and everything, but what's this dumb thing you said about the R square being different? And why does that matter? I don't think that's important. And my first reaction was like, oh shit. This is like the reason I flew to Philadelphia was to meet this dude and he hated my talk. But after sifting through what he actually said rather than what I heard as he said it, clearly wasn't saying he hated my talk. He was mentoring me and saying like, well,
Right.
I think about it. But um, yeah, I don't know. I think I have a kind of rough edge too. So I think this kind of thing doesn't bother me that much, but I certainly can see if you don't have the personal relationship, it can feel like, wow. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, I think so. This is definitely a piece that is not true for Aiden. Like, I think that Aiden is. I mean, no, he's direct, but he's
More
very
polished.
kind in his delivery and very gentle and not judicious. anyways, he's very fair-minded in the way that he goes about things. And I'm a little bit more direct, and I notice in a little bit more because I think that that conveys like I care about you like
Right.
enough to give you feedback. Like I'm investing time to tell you, and I want you to improve because I think that you can. If I didn't think that, then I would not give you I would not spend the time to give you feedback. And so, but just to your point, it's like I forget like, oh yeah, that people are coming from different places. They may not know that about me. And so then I kind of just like do the extremes of like give my direct feedback and then at the end to be like, and you're really awesome. Just
Right,
to
and then it's weird. Yeah, it's a little bit like the Mr. Miyagi of like, yeah, I'm not explaining to you why I'm telling you to wax the car. Just do it, and later on you're going to see why, and don't worry about it. But
yeah.
I don't know. I think the other thing that happens is, particularly for me when I first started, was you sort of assume all of your students must be like you, just like you assume that all mentors must be like yours. And then it takes you a while to realize, Bobby gave me, your colleague, Bobby Kruger, gave me really good advice early on that like you should figure out what your students are good and bad at, and then like, like a baseball manager, put them in the position where they're most likely to succeed. And I think I wasn't that good at that. I just thought, well, everyone's probably more or less like me because of egocentricity, I suppose. And I think I probably hurt some feelings along the way because I said things that I, as a student, would have appreciated, but didn't work as well. Probably still do that if I'm honest.
Well, do you mean like in a way of like giving like I guess could you give a specific example of what you mean? And not like an actual like person necessarily, but just
One thing that's happened, I think, one thing I think is difficult about the kinds of programs, particularly the way they do it in the States, is that a lot of the students who end up in clinical programs, particularly really high quality ones like where you're at or where you were trained, people get there just because they kind of kept being good at school and never stopped being
right,
good at school. And they didn't really have time or life experience to ask themselves, like, is this really what I want to be doing? And then every time you kind of climb up the next rung of the ladder, the competition gets tougher and the job gets tougher. And that's why there's this whole fake it till you make it kind of thing and whatever. And like many people are insecure because part of it is that like I'm not the smartest person in the room anymore for many students. But part of it too is that like just because I could do this doesn't mean that this is what I want for my life. And I think it's really hard to parse that when you're just kind of like trying to keep going, get good grades and then publish papers and then get your dissertation done and then get an internship. It's like, and I think um, a couple of times with students that I had, it became clear to me that like this isn't really for them. And I
I
think
see.
I think I sped that process up. I should have let it naturally progress. So the
Mhm.
combination of like giving them the message that they're like not really doing a good job at the research part, and maybe they're not cut out for the
Right,
program. I think that's the way it came
right,
across, where in my mind, what I'm thinking is like, good, you've learned something about yourself. It hasn't been a huge cost, maybe a year or two. And now you look,
right.
if you're in a program like this one, you could be doing almost anything in this world. And you're young
Yeah.
and you could go and do, and I think I probably hurt feelings because I sort of saw that maybe sooner. Often it's like this in therapy too, right? Where you kind of see what's happening before, and the point is to let the patient realize what's happening, and likewise the student. So I think
Yeah.
that's one example of where I probably was harsher than I needed to be.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that specific case, but that's yeah, because I was thinking too that because I don't have grad students yet, but I so a lot of my mentoring has been in the context of undergrads who just have this like I like psychology, therefore I need to get a PhD. And I think that I actively want to discourage anyone from getting a PhD unless they are so the right fit for it because it just doesn't make sense. But to me, I feel like the work is like figuring out like what is it that you actually want. So like not chasing like status or a degree or something like that. Like that's more just like a secondary outcome of the thing that you're actually like motivated by and interested in. So if like what really excites you is like learning new things and like starting, like having projects and seeking out knowledge and working together with teams, like being independent, then it's like, okay, then we can follow what does that look like? What is that career?
Right.
And I think maybe part of what you're saying too is that people are kind of chasing the wrong thing and then they come into the PhD program and there's like a mismatch between what it is that actually like excites them and what I mean, I think I see this a lot with grad students who end up going, they want to do clinical work because they're like, actually, it turns out I just like
Totally.
learning about people and like working with them. And I actually don't want to just look at CSV files all day long.
But that also happens where people have this romantic idea about what therapy is like, and then they do it for a while, and then they're like, "Ew, I don't want, that's like boring and it usually doesn't work, and I feel like an idiot." And so I think, yeah, I mean, young adulthood should be kind of a time if you have the privilege and space and income and support to be able to try different things out, to really find out like what you're good at. And um, ours is like an amazing job if you love it. But if you don't, it's brutal. I mean, most of the time you're getting told how dumb you are through most of your career. That's basically the job.
Totally. Yeah. And I had a very prolonged develop like I didn't start my PhD until I was 30 or something. And I had already got an MSW and worked at a grocery
Mhm.
store for 8 years. Like, I had had like 5 careers before I got to that. And I think
Mhm.
that's how some of my bias is that like people need to have a lot of experiences before they
Yeah.
decide to commit to a
It's hard to
PhD.
say. I think when I was still in the States, I sort of developed the bias too of like I'd rather, all things equal, I'd probably prefer a student who's done something other than a bachelor's degree. But on the other hand, I can think of a lot of good examples of people who flew through and had a PhD by the time they were 24 and are amazing. So I mean, it's like actuarial clinical assessment. The problem persists. Like, who knows what makes for a living
Totally.
and what doesn't? Well, okay, let me turn this around then, because we're talking about like what drives you. I think one thing that's been really impressive about your career to me is that you have um, dipped your toes in a lot of cutting edge things. Like my sense is that like so you worked with Aiden and the ESM stuff is now kind of commonplace, but like probably when you started, this is like sort of a new thing, and then passive sensing, high top, LLM. I mean, how much is this like a strategic choice for you? How much is this like curiosity? Like, what's up with that?
I've been very bad at strategy for the like so what you're describing is it's very hard for me to like write this is my program of research because I have to really make up a story. I mean, and I have at this point, like I do understand like what is the coherent through line, but it's been driven by my curiosity strictly and my dissatisfaction. Maybe is another way to put it in terms of like the methodological breadth, because a lot of people will say, "Oh, you're like a methods person," which always like offends me.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Like, because to me, I read that as like I'm not interested in the concepts. Like, I just am interested just for the sake of the methods, and I am interested in the methods because I want to get at the constructs, and I
Mhm.
just don't think I'm just not satisfied with one method, any one method, and certainly not status quo self-report as things have been. So, anyways, I think that the breadth of interest has been just that I think that we need a lot of different methods in order to understand people and the methodological side. And then even conceptually, I mean, I've not committed myself to like studying a thing. It's more just like all the things. And so if I were to describe like what is the core question of mine is like, what's the difference between psychopathology and not psychopathology? Like, where is the line between person? How do we define the difference between just normative individual differences and when does it become pathological? And I have no grandiose thoughts that I'm ever going to answer that question. But I think I can asymptotically sort of approach that through a lot of different perspectives. That's the idea.
But if you were at a bar with like a smart physicist, And you said you study personality and psychopathology, and then they say, well, what's the difference between those two things? And you're just making conversation. I mean, what's your answer?
I mean, I think I'd say that it depends on the context. So I think that it's important to understand both that there are general tendencies that I think we could say on average are problematic. So if you're experiencing problems in your life, that's generally a good indicator that there's psychopathology going on. Like if other people have problems with you or you feel like you're having problems, that's probably a good sign. But that in and of itself doesn't necessarily mean because people could be having problems, but it's just because the situation sucks, not
Right.
because they suck. And I would say that my research then I want to understand how can we define that not just on a case by case basis, because I think that's easy enough to do ish. Which is like for any given person, can I decide whether they are whether this situation is psychopathology or whether it's more the context, but can we develop a more generalizable sort of theory that we can account for all the different specific cases? Okay, so that is going beyond physicist talk,
She's
but
really smart. She gets most of what you just said. I
okay.
mean, I think this is one thing that, I mean, dimensional diagnosis doesn't solve this problem, but it really puts a spotlight on the problem. Whereas if you live in a world of categorical syndromes, it's like, well, if you have five symptoms, then you have it. And right, and but I mean, in principle, a person could max out your favorite multi-scale questionnaire, the high top SR or the MMPI or whatever, have the worst possible score on every single scale. Now, this person's probably having a hard time in life if they were answering honestly. We'd also have questions about that. But there's a world in which that person could be fine. So to me, this really illustrates the issue of like you're not going to get the answer to this question in the severity of the psychopathology or the extremity of the personality.
Exactly. I mean, it's more just like a signal. It's like one piece of information of like, I mean, probabilistically, if
Sure.
someone is on this end, it's like, okay, we should probably pay more attention to that. Honestly, I think the trickier cases is when people are like would be at more like the midpoint of the scale. So they're not or like they're like a pretty agreeable person, for example. Not like even super extremely agreeable, but they're just like pretty agreeable. But if they're surrounded by people who are kind of like conniving and willing to exploit them or whatever, they still might be experiencing problems. And then I just have to decide like, is your decision to continue engaging in that agreeable behavior, is that to the point that it's pathological? Or is it still the problem, like the fact that you're around these people and you should extract? Like, so those are the complexities that we totally miss with these dimension measures. But I I think I don't have a good answer yet of how we can formalize that in a way that's like empathetic, I guess. Especially not in an applied setting without just like talking to a person and asking them about these things.
I mean, what you just said is getting pretty close to the kind of interpersonal way of thinking about it, of like whatever the cause was or whatever it is, it's like the dynamic interaction with your context. Like if you keep doing stuff that causes you to have a hard time achieving your goals, or if you keep doing stuff that makes it hard for other people to achieve their goals, if assuming that they're
Right.
reasonable and pro-social goals and all that, then and you kind of can't get yourself out of that loop. That's more or
Right.
less the Pincus CIIT definition of psychopathology, right? Like recurrent patterns of maladaptive behavior in interpersonal situations.
Right. Right. And that another way to that I might put that is like it's less about like the specific content of the behavior and more about like the patterning or um the dynamic. Yeah. Like so in this the example case that I gave, like it's not so much that the behavior in and of itself in a vacuum is most people would call it pathological. I'm a nice person. Usually not pathological, but the issue is the failure to adjust to the environment in that case.
Right. I want to pick up a thread that you laid down a second ago about like this insult when people call you methodologist. I think there is a kind of like this is something I spent a lot of time thinking about, like what is a psychologist? And I think there are people who have the kind of opposite reaction to you that would wear methodologist as a badge of honor. And I'm perfectly happy to hang out with people like that for the most part. But I think there is a kind of risk of like naive mathism because over the last couple generations, you know, the main innovation, we haven't learned a whole lot about people, but I think we've made a lot of advances with methods, with assessment methods and with analytic methods. I mean, when I was a PhD student, we learned about like ANOVA and regression, right? And I mean, we still use ANOVA and regression, but like latent variables were
Yeah.
like, oh, you could take that course if you're feeling frisky, kind of a thing, right? And longitudinal multi-level models, et cetera, same thing. And now, I mean, there's so many extensions of those that it's not worth talking about. But um, and so there's been a kind of cachet of people who have been able to be good at that. And maybe that's stopping now that you can ask AI to write all your script or whatever. Um, but there has been a kind of generation, I guess you're in the generation where some people, and I think this is also correlated with like social media, Twitter, blogs, open science. There's a kind of like whole thing that happened, a kind of chaos theory state space thing that happened where it became okay to call yourself a psychologist even though you didn't this well, this is me being harsh, but even though you don't really act like one, like you don't think about human beings in a way that
Right.
traditionally we think of psychologists thinking about human beings. You're like, if you know the best model, then you're awesome. And if you can show people
Right.
on Twitter how their model sucks, then you're really doing like cutting edge psychology.
Right. I think it's like being a technician, or maybe if, like a couple metaphors that come to mind is like being like a crafts person versus an artist. Like you can execute the technical procedures, but you're not really synthesizing or being creative, or in this specific what we're talking about, like the point of having methods is to learn a thing about something in the world, in which case there needs to be a thoughtful match between what the method is and what the thing is that you're trying to study. But if you're just having this method that you're just kind of like executing to perfection, but you're not actually generating any useful knowledge, then yeah, that's a different goal. And it's very impressive when people can,
Yeah,
I,
totally. And I like working with people like that. But I think and there's different attitudes. People can be more or less self-aware about this. And I'm talking more about the like the the less self-aware sort of
yes,
style. You know, I think it's another symptom of this is not really knowing much about history. It's sort of like not know what's the difference between ego psychology and object relations theory, or what's the difference between classical instrument. What was Skinner on about? Why did he really think it was important to operationalize stuff and observe stuff? And like these kinds of things that are so fundamental that we're building on. I think the fact that you can fit a model or know the right estimator to use in a certain situation doesn't impress me much if you
right.
kind of can't embed it in a deeper knowledge of the field.
Right. This has really come to a fore for me recently, work because I've definitely reached the bounds of my technical abilities when it comes to a lot of like machine learning or large language models, AI stuff. And so I've therefore had to outsource a lot of the actual implementation to people without domain knowledge. And having to learn enough to be able to know when it's matching the question or not, and like making that very explicit in a way that I think wasn't explicit when it was just among psychologists, I guess.
Right.
um and but it's been a good exercise for me, I think, in clarifying that
Yeah.
and being able to communicate to people outside the field.
Yeah, team science is awesome when it works. And having people, I mean, I really need at this point in my career to work with people who are better at methods than me for the most part. Um, but um, And like I say, to me, it's like in that situation, it's different because this is a situation where the roles are kind of defined. Like you're the math person, I'm the like concepts person, and we have to make sure to communicate so we're both on the same page. But you don't have to know everything I know, and I don't have to know everything you know. That's what the team is for. That's different than I think I think that than like this sort of naive mathism taking replacing. Um, you know, like
Totally.
the idea that there's new ideas, for example. is another symptom of this of this syndrome that I'm describing. When
No, totally.
you see people all the time say, "Oh, I've got this new idea." It's like, no, I can give you 14 references from the 1940s where people were talking about this all the time. I mean, they didn't have the
No.
methods to study it well. Um, okay, listen, I gave you a homework assignment,
Yeah.
and I think it had something to do with you're at a family gathering, and there's some relative who you know often makes critical comments about your life choices. Like, why are you there in Minnesota where it's cold and I don't know what's the not really much to criticize Minneapolis for. People are so friendly. Maybe the accent, I don't know.
The friendly, well, the whole thing is they're friendly but not warm. So they're
Yeah,
polite, but
Scandinavian.
they're yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there you go.
Scandi friendly.
That's yep.
Um, and you find so you like you have to hang out. It's like anti whatever. You got to be nice. But you dread the interaction. And every time you leave, you're like this close to saying something to them or okay, so if you want, I can give you external support. I've got slides with the interpersonal circle or the interpersonal situation or SASB. Would you like that, or do you want to do it without?
Sure, if you got slides. I was
Okay.
thinking about it both in terms of the interpersonal uh circumflex and SASB.
Okay.
So
We'll start.
yeah,
Let's
okay.
start with the circle.
Yeah, we can start here, yeah.
It's a blurry
So
circle. I apologize.
yeah, it is nice. But so I mean, so I think that we would characterize, and so just to be clear, in the way that you worded it in the email was that they were avoiding, so they're wanting to like avoid this situation because they thought they're perceiving their family's lack of support or lack of defensiveness as they agree with this other family member.
Oh, right. I did say that. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't say that very well.
That's cool. So I think I would characterize this person's, and then presumably their goal here is why they're asking me about this is because they want to feel less anxious in these situations. Because there could be a lot of goals that they have, like maybe, but we'll assume that they want to feel less anxious, and so they have these dynamics going on. So their behavior right now is pretty much on the kind of like submissive, introverted side of things, I'd say. And so maybe I actually want the SASB.
Can you see it?
Yes, this is a different one than I was just reminding myself about.
Oh,
So
here's the focus on other. Oh, you can see. Yeah.
yeah. Uh, so I guess we're assuming they're kind of like, okay, I'm gonna step back and just say, and we'll see how it maps onto this. But basically the person is low agency, they're withdrawing right now.
Hmm.
And the other person, and so what we want to move them more towards is being like assertive, but not going so much, not hostile, because we want to also invite warmth, but decrease the sort of as- attacks from the other family member. But there's sort of two levers to pull here, right? So there's the way that the behavior in the moment towards the person who's attacking them. And then there's also how they interact with the family who they wish was supporting them in this
Hmm.
moment.
Because if it was just the like jerk, the aunt being a jerk, and the family was like, "Oh, there's the aunt being a jerk again," it would be different. But in the scenario, and I didn't set this up well, but in the scenario, part of the hesitation is like, not only is the aunt being a jerk, but my whole family seems to be on her side.
Exactly, exactly. So these sort of two dynamics to work with. So one is like in the moment, how do you react to somebody who's kind of attacking you? And
Hmm.
so instead of taking this sort of withdrawn submissive position, which presumably this person is taking in the moment, which
Hmm.
then invites the other person to just continue to have sort of like the hostile dominant attack, to kind of move them into a more, hopefully like invite them to move into a more submissive warm position, you would take a little bit more of an assertive warm position and be like, hey, like I really want to just like get along in this family gatherings, and like I want to talk about lots of stuff with you, but I'm just going to say I don't really want to talk about like my life choices. Like let's just say that that's something that we don't talk about, but we can talk about all the other stuff.
Hmm.
And so asserting what it is that you want, but like in a warm way that doesn't put them on the defense.
And so in a SASB framework, going from the kind of complementarity in the third position between hostile power and hostile compliance, I'm just going to play this game with you and be a punching
Yes,
bag for a while because like I have to come to Thanksgiving, asserting yourself, establishing your own autonomy in a warm way and saying like, look, I might be different in this way, but for that reason, let's not talk about this thing. Let's talk about all the ways in which we're happy to be together and hoping that that will provoke a complement of encouraging autonomy and friendliness.
exactly.
Yeah.
So then the other dynamic then though is with the other family members who they are not saying anything at the moment. And so I think the key there is that the person's read on the behavior, their idea about the behavior is like, this means that they don't support me and that they actually agree with the family member. And so, but they've just kind of assumed that. And I think I would recommend that, like, that's just a hypothesis you need to check. That's your perception. So I guess in this case, we'd be thinking about maybe the interpersonal situation and that this is their perception. And you would want to then again take the stance of sort of being like assertive and warm and like asking directly to the family members outside of that situation. So when you're not in the heat of the moment, and be like, hey, so like when we're at family gatherings and my bitchy aunt says these things and you don't say anything, I feel like this means that you agree with them. And what
Mhm.
I wish what would happen in the moment is that maybe that you would stand up for me or you would say something and just give them like open up the conversation to check the hypothesis if it's true. Presumably it's not true, but then inviting this sort of so like because you it sounds like the person wants them to be in this protective role, in which case you would kind of take the I rely on you, I trust you, and invite that protector role.
Mhm. Or even checking in and if they say something like, look,
Yes.
we've been dealing with this for decades.
Yeah.
It's better not to, like if we all gang up on her, I mean, there's going to be chaos. I got your back. I'm not going to say anything. It's going to feel bad, but trust me, I see what you're going through.
Right.
Like even that, without the active support in the moment,
Yes.
would be better. And I guess the other thing that I was thinking about is that like it depends in part on the self or in the SASB model on the interject of like, do you accept
Right.
yourself enough to kind of keep track of the difference between I'm me and I'm okay and I'm just here for Thanksgiving versus the family is connecting with something inside of me that sort of doubts my own life choices and whether, and maybe my bitchy aunt is right and I suck.
Right. I mean, so a different framework that I was thinking when you posed this question, so not to throw too much of a monkey wrench into it, but from DBT, dialectical
Not
behavior
allowed.
therapy.
Nope, not allowed. Foul. No, I'm just playing. Go ahead, sorry.
uh, I really liked this sort of like way of thinking about when you have an interpersonal problem, you're clarifying your goals and you kind of put your goals into three categories. One of them would be like, is the relationship the most important thing? So in this case is like, do I really want to preserve the relationship with either my bitchy aunt or my family members? Or just the objective is the objective the primary goal? Like, do I just want to not be criticized in this situation, or do I just want to get through, or is it my self-respect? In which
Mhm.
case, each of those three goals for the person, priorities for the person, would kind of implicate different things. Because if it was just self-respect, then you may not even need to. I mean, maybe you need to assert yourself, or maybe you just be like, I just need to self-regulate on my own, and I will keep avoiding, and like that's not a big deal.
That's what Jesus made tobacco for.
Exactly.
I mean, I really valued my DBT training because of these practical things of like just put it in boxes. I think about this all the time because as psychologists, people will often tell you like, "Oh, I'm in this relationship, it's going badly," or my friend's having a hard time, or my partner's having a hard time. And I always think, and it's a delicate thing to say, but I always think like, okay, but how important is this relationship to you? Like, do you really want to make this your problem? Do you want to take this on? Or do you want to say that's your jam? I mean, like I'm here for you when we're like want to be cool, and this other stuff that you got going on that like that's not me, which can feel harsh, but the alternative is taking on a lot of other people's stuff. Um,
Right. Or likewise, like people, I think a lot of people go into situations like kind of defending their ego or something, or their self-respect in this
right,
case, but then tramp on the relationship and then they're sad when the relationship isn't working out. It's like, well, okay, sometimes you have to like sacrifice a little bit of the ego part if your priority was actually the relationship in that case.
right.
So,
So, what's next for you, Professor Ringwald? How do you think about the next phase of your career? I mean, because you talked about like how you're just sort of curious, you're using these methods to try to figure stuff out. And I mean, I feel the same frustration. Like we know almost nothing. I read stuff from, as I mentioned, decades ago, and I'm like, these guys knew as much about. Mostly
mhm.
what we've done is like ruled out some ideas that in retrospect were kind of like obviously dumb. We haven't learned a lot. So it's like a very slow science, a very young science, and very frustrating. And so I'm with you with like just try to get some methodological tools to like and hope you hit something. But within that constraint, I mean, what's your focus or what are you excited about?
I mean, currently, I've my white whale for a long time has been like measuring context better, like
Uh-huh.
independent, like we can ask people about context and situations all the time, and we're getting really good at, I think, being able to access that, like in EMA and things like that. But I think being able to separate people's psychological perception is like a really important thing. So using things like smartphone sensors. So I'm doing a lot of like, like geotagging and things like that in order to just triangulate between the psychological meaning, people's perception, and also sort of like objective features of the situation, and trying to get a better sense of how those two different parts have a role in determining behavior. But I've also shifted more towards thinking about even better defining behavior. Um, and so I've been doing a lot more with like AI and thinking about how can we pick up on not just what's explicit, but what's implicit, and using, for example, large language models to basically read between the lines and do what we do when we're talking to human beings and we're inferring lots of things all the time that's not being explicitly said, but that's actually the bulk of like what's being
Sure.
communicated. And we can actually do that now. And so I'm really excited about being able to kind of formalize that, but it's just a total frontier. So I think we have to do a lot of the like basic psychometric stuff before we can really maximize and make use of some of those technologies. But I think like the long range goal is to be able to access a lot, systematically access sort of the implied information that we're missing with most of our other methods.
That is what people tend to think psychologists should be good at, is like understanding why people are doing stuff. And you kind of forget that, like after, like decades of doing research makes you sort of forget that
Yeah,
that's the question we should
yeah,
be going after because we're
yeah.
like, yeah, but how can we make our model fit better, whatever. But it's like, no, the point is to understand what you just said. I think it's easy to see what a person's doing in a kind of context-free way, or even what they're feeling maybe, but like why? And
Right.
this is really the most fundamental psychological question is like, why do people do stuff?
Right. Well, I mean, I think like to me, that is what personality is. Like that, what is just what distinguishes the different kinds of traits and things like it. It's like if you can different, a behavior only has its meaning based on what it's motivated by, and whether that's a conscientious thing or an extroversion thing depends on why you're doing it. And we
Right.
literally can't, you can only infer it based on what the overt behavior is in the context, and we think then we can understand the motive. But if there was a better, like a more way we could just like actually measure motives, that would be pretty cool.
Indeed. Well, if anybody can figure out, it's probably you. So I think time's just about up. Thanks for doing this, Tsarina of the Circle, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.